Good morning, everyone in Malaysia. This is Matthias from Future Fast Forward. Today, I'm doing something very different from my usual address to all of you. Before I go on to those issues, may I wish each and every Christian a very Merry Christmas. And to the Chinese community, today, as you know, is a very special occasion, 21st December, the commencement of the Winter Solstice Festival, for which, to Chinese culture, we must have a family reunion. And this festival, to those who are non-Chinese, is more important than the Spring Festival or a Chinese New Year. More of that on another day. We are now approaching the end of 2016 and welcoming a new year, 2017. To all Malaysians, I wish you in advance a happy and, more importantly, a victorious new year for the people of Malaysia in the heroic struggle against a despotic criminal regime. God willing, the coming year will have new celebrations of the victorious struggle of the patriots of Malaysia. Why this morning I'm speaking to you all from my inner office, my inner sanctum, is because many people have asked me how I get my ideas, how I formulate my speeches, my ideas, and what drives me to do what I do. In all my speeches, I've always said, either at the end of my speech or in the interval in between my address, I've always referred and encouraged all of you to surrender to the will of God Almighty completely, and have absolute faith that He will protect us, defend us, and guide us under all circumstances in the face of all adversities and enemies. I do this very deliberately because it is my practice and a part of my life that I seek inspiration and guidance from the Holy Scriptures of all the religion. First and foremost, you will see that I have a copy of the Holy Quran, which also serves as a guide to me. I will also have my Bible, the King James Version, which helps me to understand better the teachings in the Quran, because there are many surahs that dovetails with the various chapters of the Bible. And then I have as a guide the Bhagavad Gita, which has been with me for many, many years. And this gives me an insight into Hinduism. I then have a book on Buddhism, the Dhammapada, consists of various verses of Buddha. And this also has given me a lot of inspiration and guidance. Next, I have the Taoist texts, which I also follow in the course of my life, being an essential part of the Chinese culture. And then there are two books that has brought me a lot of inspiration and a perspective which I find missing in many people that I engage with in my conversation or debates. The first book is called Why Religion Matters by Huston Smith. The other, very important, When Religion Becomes Evil by Charles Kimball. These two books I have read repeatedly because it reminds me why to today there are continuing confrontation and misunderstanding between religion, and why so often people use religion for their own agenda and to wage war in the name of God, and resulting in genocide and massacre of millions of people worldwide. On issues relating to economics and finance, I would like to, for the time being, I would like to introduce a very important book called Signals by Pippa Meldrum, who I had previously invited to come to Malaysia to have a special dialogue with Tun Mahathir Mohamad. Please buy this book. It will open your eyes as to how we can better understand global finance and economics, and how to draw lessons, correlate facts and ideas, and apply to Malaysia. This book is indispensable, has been highly evaluated and praised even by Dr. Mahathir Mohamad and by a good friend of mine, Mr. James Rickards. Buy this book and read it and study it. The other book which I use as a guide, as a tool for analysis, is I Ching, The Book of Changes, by a very great philosopher called Hua Qing-ni. Being a Chinese, I've used this book as a guide to analyze complex ideas and philosophies. These are my guiding books and principles, and I hope you'll buy those books and help you get a better understanding of how to apply your mind and a methodology to analyze complex issues. Insofar as politics is concerned, I've always focused on various periods of history, not only of China, but other parts of the world. But insofar as China is concerned, I've paid a lot of attention to the historical period of the Three Kingdoms. And I have studied long and hard a great mind, a great philosopher and strategist, Zhuge Liang. And the other strategist of that period is Cao Cao, who was the emperor of the Wei Empire. Take time to buy the DVD that's available on shops, which tells the whole entire history of that period, the fighting between three kingdoms, and how the leaders of the three kingdoms apply political strategy, military strategy, financial strategy to succeed. And I've used those strategies and thought processes and applied to my understanding of issues in Malaysia as well as in the world. And I hope you will take time to also do that. Now, I'm going to explain to you that the most difficult part for any analysis or strategist is to think. It's more difficult than you realize. If I were to put you in a room in isolation with a piece of paper and a pen or pencil and asked you to think about any issues and put up in paper your thoughts, I can assure you, you'll give up in half an hour, because you may not have the correct methodology or the approach as to how to think. Obviously, There are many, many books on thinking with clarity, with insights, but nothing can be compared to actual practice on thinking. Let me pause here and ask you, from the time you get up in the morning, when you go to office for a full day of working, and you come back home after a hard day's work, and before you retire into the night, I want you to take a piece of paper and analyze of the 16-hour day, how many actual hours or minutes you actually spent on thinking by yourself, either before you go for a meeting or after meeting, or in preparation of the day's work or the next day's work, thinking. I can assure you, you spend very little time on thinking. Now, I do not intend to spoon-feed you as to how to think. I won't be so presumptuous that you do not know how to think. But in this address, I want to share with you how I think. And I will give you a particular graph as an example. Alright? And see whether, looking at this particular graph, you can trigger your mind to think and apply what you learn from that picture, from that graph, into the bigger picture of financial analysis, and draw from that picture lessons and methods to be applied elsewhere. This is a graph of an S&P index, the highs and lows. You will notice on the bottom corner, this corner here, or rather this corner here, you see the first cross, and the words are Yellen, equity market valuations at this point is generally are quite high. You got that? Those words? Then you have X1, another point higher up, X2, another point in the graph much higher up, and then at the very top, X3, there Yellen, Chairman of the Federal Reserve of America, says stock valuations are in normal ranges. Can I just pause here? I want you to pause your video, use a handphone and photograph this graph. Okay? I pause it for a while for you to take your handphone, okay, and then capture this graph. Now, why do I ask you to do so, and why this morning am I asking you to follow this as an example in developing the correct methodology and perspective in analyzing issues, concepts, or problems? You got it? So, you realize there is something very unusual, isn't it, from this graph? At one point, low end of the graph, the Chairman of the Federal Reserve says that the market valuation at that point reflects quite high valuation. And then at point X3, the highest point, the same person, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, says stock valuations at that point is quite normal. And this is a period of from April of 2016 to December of 2016, within 7 months. You saw the graph, but the analysis and the observation by the Fed chairperson, Janet Yellen, totally contrasting, totally contradictory. Let me pause here. What do you make of this graph? What can you learn from this graph? Do you go back home, print that graph and look at it and say, so obvious, and leave it at that? Or do you need to do more and go behind this graph and ask yourself at least minimum 50 other questions? And what else you need to research to arrive at proper conclusions, criticisms, and analysis that will help you make forecasts, objective conclusion analysis. Let me assure you, I've tested this graph on many people, and without trying to discourage you, I can assure you 99% of people having studied this graph at most gave a very superficial analysis and jump and says, what rubbish is this? In May, she says one thing. In December, she says another thing. General conclusion, how stupid, how contradictory, how unprofessional. These are the general statements made. Other than that, very few people have gone beyond that initial superficial analysis. Like I say, 99% got it wrong. That's why in the real world, the people who can think and analyze correctly are less than 1%. Because no one person who take themselves seriously, who wants to give objective analysis and advice, not only to themselves, to their friends, or to their colleagues in business, or to their own business, want to arrive at superficial conclusions. But to arrive at detailed, conclusive conclusions, one has to go beyond this graph. It's so easy to say, we must think out of the box. We must be creative. Easier said than done. Therefore, I'd like to invite you, having taken a photograph of this graph, printed it out, if you have time, do this exercise, and I welcome you to either WhatsApp me your comments or write to me via email at my email address, changmatthias@hotmail.com. CHANGMATTHIAS@hotmail.com. I can assure you, this exercise is not given to you as a waste of time, but is a very serious invitation to you to adopt certain methodology, certain approaches, so that next year, when we take on the filthy, degenerate, corrupt, criminal regime, we will know how to apply our mind. We will know how to distinguish between propaganda, fake news, disinformation, misinformation, to flog and to confuse, distort the rakyat from the truth. Because we live in the world of information. We live in the world of propaganda. I can assure you it's very difficult for many people to read beyond headlines in newspaper or on television or the computer. And very often, like I said, 98% of people will accept a headlines, a slogan for what it's worth and walked away, and then in their subconscious mind, their brain is paralyzed, stagnated, and shackled. It's very difficult when you're in that state of mind, of a shackled mind, to free yourself and be able to see through the fog of war, the fog of propaganda war, and arrive at the truth. But more importantly, not only should you arrive at the truth, but have the ability to counter those lies by independent research, independent analysis, and independent and objective conclusion. Without that, you cannot counter and win over the lies, the propaganda, the distortion, the manipulation. This is what's going to happen. In 1 year, I have given you about 46 video speeches. And each one of my speeches, addresses, I've taken the trouble to speak to you in detail, as well as giving you various pages of slogans and propaganda poured out by the regime to confuse you. And I showed you how I counter and expose those propaganda, distortion and manipulation, so that you know the true picture. But of course, in that process, I was actually spoon-feeding you, telling you how to distinguish between false and genuine news. And I use specific examples. In the coming year, there'll be other issues, other fake news which I have not covered and will not be able to cover. It will be impossible for me to address all these issues. So you must, on your own, when you come across fake news, propaganda, manipulation, distortion, the fog of war, you must have that mental discipline, the mental resilience and capacity to distinguish between fake news and the truth. Because in a war against a filthy, criminal, despotic regime who controls all the mass media, all the organs of media, the only way you yourself can prevent from being a victim of propaganda, a victim of fake news, is you yourself must be armed with a methodology, with a correct approach. That's why, in the beginning of this morning address, I started by showing to you what are the Holy Scriptures I read. Because the moral compass, the spiritual compass, is fundamental in enabling all of you and all of us to face the truth, to expose lies. Hence, my slogan, my principal concept, in front of my lectern when I speak to you in my addresses, utamakan Allah, bukan Najib. Utamakan Allah, bukan parti UMNO. Because if you put issues in the correct perspective, in the correct priorities, putting God first, and Christians cannot object to that slogan, utamakan Allah, because Christians have demanded that God be called Allah. So therefore, this slogan, utamakan Allah, transcends all religion, all races, all political divide. Put God first. Once you have that perspective, you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't distort, you can't yourself manipulate. With that correct frame of mind, you will initially, instinctively, and later, with reasoned arguments, able to expose lies, fake news, manipulation, and distortion. And then you read all the other books which I've recommended to you. These are the basic building blocks, building tools that will give you and sharpen your mind, your critical mind, and then to cultivate the discipline Because without that kind of discipline, without that kind of approaches, it's almost impossible for you to have the passion, the dedication, the perseverance, the resilience to fight for the cause. And today, we are fighting for a very noble cause to free our country from the scourge of that evil of corruption, tyranny, abuse of power by the present regime. And to unite all of us together with one voice, under one flag, excuse me, and guided by the God Almighty, surrendered to His will, and have absolute faith, excuse me, that He will protect us, defend us, and guide us under all circumstances, in the face of all enemies and adversities. Excuse me. We will not prevail and we will not win. That's why today I've changed my methodology and my focus on my address to you to share with you how I equip myself to fight this war of propaganda. And before I conclude, I would like to share with you that I practice what I preach. I would like to show you my inner sanctum, who are the people that guide me spiritually, morally. I hope the camera will give you a glimpse of my inner sanctum and how I find peace and solace and courage to do what I'm doing. God bless all of you. I hope with those views you have a glimpse and a better understanding where I'm coming from. I do not just talk, but I do practice what I preach. I find solace, inspiration by learning all religion. I do not pass judgment. And in my course of studying the various holy scriptures from various religions, I found so much common grounds for us to unite as opposed to divide. And I hope you will now have better understanding where I'm coming from. And I hope you continue to support me and give me strength in the coming years when I continue to wage a relentless struggle against the nasty, filthy, corrupt, cruel regime, so that ultimately we will have victory. To thank God Almighty for His protection and for that victory. With that, I wish you all once again Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. God bless you all. Thank you.